Hey guys, so this week we are closing out our discussion around grief and loss in the different stages of life with talking about loss in old age. And so this is considered 70 and beyond. Developmentally, what is the stage here? It is integrity versus despair. And of course, integrity is a sense of accomplishment, feeling good about something, feeling proud of yourself, and despair being a sense of regretfulness and feeling unfulfilled. And these feelings are attached to the question of, did I live a meaningful life? So that is the core question at this age of when I look back on my life, how do I feel about it? And so there are, of course, many other normal developmental things that are a part of old age that contribute to feelings of loss. Preparation for your own death. The human body is really meant to age out at about 90. That's really when the human machine reaches its peak. Of course, we know that there are many people who live past that. But naturally, if we could all live to our own, and die of natural means, 90 would be about the average age. So preparing for your own death, realizing that you're not going to live forever, sitting with those thoughts. And of course, many people will come to that, face that conflict much sooner, being aware of their own mortality, but by old age, this is when everyone really has to face that question. This is also a huge change in your roles. Usually this is in retirement. You've raised kids if you're going to have them. You have lived your life, and then in old age, because there are a lot of changes in your body, and cognitive abilities, often individuals in old age are disengaging from past roles, past responsibilities. They're not needing to support a family anymore. They're not needing to go out and work. So it can be a time of a lot of change. There is constant change, as I said earlier, in your abilities, in your health, in your social roles. And it is also a season where you're navigating the death of friends and loved ones. Earlier in the semester, we had discussed grief and how that fit into the concept of the different seasons. And old age really is the season of loss and meaning making. It is the season of winter, which doesn't, that's not to say that life is over, but that it has slowed down, it has changed, and while there are definitely opportunities for new adventures in old age, and people who most successfully navigate old age find new joys and new passions and new hobbies and new adventures. But it is a time where there is a great deal of loss. And so this is a time when psychologically it's developmentally very normal for people to start to really solidify their viewpoints around death and loss. And of course, many people start to think about these questions of their own mortality much sooner, but this is the time when everyone is really going to have to face these questions if they've lived to old age. Because you will lose friends, family members. This is a time when you're probably going to a lot of funerals. Everyone you know will die. And when you are older, you feel the effects of that in a greater capacity because you will have lost many people and many things by then. This is also a time, as I said earlier, of retirement, of changes in your bodily function, for many people, leaving a home, losing their home that they maybe raised their kids in. And as I said, it's also a time of facing your own mortality. The human body is thought to really reach capacity at age 90. And so we all sort of understand that we're not gonna live forever. And so this is a really important time in life of reflecting and making meaning of the life that you've led. You're going to experience shifts in your identity, again, your role in society, and the loss of physical capacities. So let's first talk about, I think one of the more obvious is that sense of loss in your own body, because we are finite beings and our bodies mature and then decay. So nearly all adults are going to experience changes in sensory abilities, and so that can come with things such as hearing, losses in hearing, eyesight, sense of smell, and those are things that we can take for granted when we have them, but it's actually very powerful to be able to hear the sound of the birds in the morning, to be able to look out and see beautiful colors and see the faces of loved ones. So those can be very normal losses, but they're hard. They can come with challenges. Your joints will degenerate, organs can reduce in function, and chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, diabetes, and strokes are very common in 70 plus. There are cognitive changes that have come along with that. Verbal processing, memory, and reaction times are likely to decline. They slow down. But again, that doesn't mean that you totally lose those things. But this reminds me of my husband's grandmother, Grandma June. She was an incredible force. She died at age 93, and at 91, she was still driving around. So some people are able to be quite old and maintain these capacities, but you're going to experience decline in some place at some point. Memory loss is a big one. Just because you might lose some short-term memory capacity doesn't mean that you're experiencing memory loss, such as Alzheimer's and dementia. But Alzheimer's and dementia are very impactful forms of memory loss. And I think what's so difficult about that level of memory loss is it can involve really losing access to long-term memories, forgetting the people in your life, not recognizing your loved ones or your family members anymore. This is a very challenging thing for family members to deal with because their loved one might physically still be there, but they might not remember them. My grandmother is actually in a living facility living with dementia, and she doesn't remember us anymore. And in a way, I've sort of already grieved the loss of her, because she's not the woman that she was before. I recently heard that she forgot that she was a gardener, and she was a lifelong master gardener, and I learned a lot about gardening from her. So there can be an incredible sense of loss from loved ones, of again, that the person is still there, but not in the same way. And it's a process of losing your memory, so it can be very challenging for caregivers, whether that's family members or particularly a lifelong partner, to watch that individual slowly decline. And I think this is just another place that I wanted to highlight disparities. So we've talked about how privilege and lack of privilege can really impact individuals through the lifespan. And we know that actually your minority status can have a huge impact on your health. And we are still uncovering all the reasons behind that. But there are higher rates of dementia in the African American and Hispanic community than the non-Hispanic white community. And it's also projected that Alzheimer's, which is a form of dementia, is projected to triple by 2060. So working with elderly individuals and understanding the impacts of memory loss, which is like losing your identity, is an important thing to be aware of. And I would say this is probably my greatest fear when I think about getting old. The thought of losing my mental capacities, my sense of myself, is probably the thing that I fear the most. And of course, this is a season of death. It's not just a season of death, but you're going to experience a lot of losses due to death when you're in your older years. And that can range from friends, family members, children, all of which can be extremely impactful. But I wanted to especially spotlight the loss of a partner in old age. Loss of a partner in old age is considered the second greatest loss that you can experience by many, with the first being the loss of a child, particularly in young or middle adulthood. But of course, as always, the quality and length of the relationship increases impacts the degree of the loss. But there are a couple things to note. First, that widowers are often more likely to struggle to adapt more than widows. And some of that is that women have traditionally taken on more roles in the household, whereas widows, which are female, women, refers to women, they tend to have historically struggled with learning how to take care of some things financially, because that was considered usually more of a male task. But most other home tasks were generally have been occupied by women, and so women have tended to fare a little bit better when losing a spouse. But again, both are extremely hard, and I think those things can change as socially the roles that men and women take on shifts. But losing a spouse, again, is considered the most impactful, and it's actually very fascinating when you look at it from a health perspective. About 6 months after losing a partner in old age, there are a very high risk of illness, depression, and suicide. And so can you die of a broken heart? Absolutely. And it happens all the time. And so I have these different images here, but I really think about the movie Up, and I think that was one of the most brilliant depictions in cinema ever of what it is like to live a life with someone and to lose them and to be sort of stuck in this brand new isolation. Because when you lose a partner, particularly when it's been a relationship that you've had for many, many years, there's a kind of codependence that develops of, not necessarily in a negative sense, but two people learn how to live life together. And they're a part of your identity. Your coupleship is such a huge identity in a way. I've even thought, I've only been married to my husband for 7 years, but if he were to randomly die, there were a lot of things I wouldn't know how to do, or where does he put certain things, or where are certain bills to be paid. I can only imagine what that's like after 50 years of being with someone, and you guys are just such a team. And so, I think of the dual process model here, which it was developed for this purpose, that when you lose a partner, you often have to really reconfigure living life and figuring out how to do that alone. And as I said earlier, there can also be other types of losses of a partner, such as a partner having dementia and you're the caregiver, where they're still there, but if there's dementia or another illness, things like a stroke that can impact kind of their cognitive functioning and their ability to be present, it can be a very difficult kind of loss of slowly feeling the loss of your partner, but them still being there. And so that can actually be one of the more frustrating loss experiences, is feeling a partner is gone, but you're still caring for them. Some of the most powerful experiences I feel like I've ever had with clients were talking about how they reflect upon their partnership in later life. There are extreme changes in daily living as we imagine when you get older, and of course we think of retirement is the first thing that comes to mind. And generally, as an older adult, you're retired, you're no longer in the workforce, you've hopefully worked a long time and have a retirement, and so that you don't need to anymore, but also of course you're slowing down, so it makes sense that you kind of step back. And a lot of people envision and hope that by the time they retire, they have that money to go out to the Bahamas and have fun and travel the world. And some people are able to do that, and some people make it happen. But of course, we know that there can actually be a lot of depression when it comes to retirement age, because you are, again, letting go of a career or jobs that informed who you were and staying busy. I think we could all have a deeper understanding, perhaps now, of how important it is to have structure in daily life, to have tasks that you're completing. That sense of fulfillment is very important to your mental well-being. And so retirement can hit a lot of people really hard because they have to ask themselves, who am I now that I don't have this career? And of course, we also are in a time of a lot of economic insecurity. So reaching old age and realizing that your retirement account was wiped out, or perhaps you never even had a job where you could contribute to retirement, it can be very challenging financially if you don't have those assets in place, and that's unfortunately becoming more and more common. I also think about changes in housing. It's very common in old age to downsize, the classic image of, you raise the kids, so it's time to sell the house, the kids are grown, so we're going to move into something smaller. It can be really hard to leave a home that you've spent many years in. And of course, not everyone does. Some people are able to maintain that home, but having a really stable, a home that you enjoy being in is very important in old age, because you are more likely to spend more time in your home. And so when we think about those options, some adults live alone, and many adults can make this work, but it can really be impactful if you don't have friends or family members that are visiting you. Isolation can have really important negative impacts on older adults. Some older adults may go live with family members, and while this can be stressful, this can tend to have really positive outcomes for older adults, because again, they have that community, they can have a sense of meaning within the family, they have wisdom to share, they can help provide care for children, and they can continue to feel involved and important. Some adults live in senior living facilities and may find that to be a meaningful and fulfilling place, but I think it is hard for a lot of those individuals when they kind of crave interaction with their family members or friends that they had earlier in life. And then I think about people who are put in nursing homes, that when they are physically incapable of taking care of themselves anymore, and if they have different kind of physical or cognitive declines, it can be very challenging and isolating and lonely. Again, but we don't want to assume at the same time that old age means that you're going to be lonely, that it means that you're going to be sad. That's not the case. Many people can have very fulfilling lives in old age, but can you imagine building a life and then everything's going to change at the end? It just will. You're not going to have that job. You probably might not live in the same place. You won't have those same roles. So it takes an incredible amount of actual emotional flexibility, I think, to navigate old age. And so, I couldn't even begin to go over all the losses that you're going to experience in old age. But we've covered several of them. But what are some of those resiliency and risk factors? And so these are things that I would be looking for with people that you work with, even perhaps your own family members and loved ones. First is isolation versus social connection. Particularly in our culture, we seem to not really know what to do with elder adults. We don't have a strong culture of celebrating them, seeking out their wisdom, and particularly when older adults get ill, family members and friends might not know what to do. So there can be a lot of isolation in old age that's really unfortunate, and it can have incredible impacts on mental and physical health. You are lonely seniors. This is a really nice graphic. 59% higher risk of physical and mental decline if you're isolated. Loneliness is very powerful on our body. Depression is very powerful on our body. So 5 factors that increase the risk of isolation: being over the age of 80, having chronic health problems, lack of contact with family, living low income, and changing family structures. So that's just a few. I also think that disenfranchised grief is really common in old age because people sort of expect, oh, you've experienced loss by now, just get over it, you should be fine. But again, when we lose things that really impact us, it's because we loved them. We loved that thing in life, or that person, that sense of something that informed our identity. So no matter the age, when you lose things that are really dear to you, it's painful. And loss never gets less sharp. You just learn how to deal with it better and make more meaning of it. But it always has that painful edge. So I think we often expect that seniors, 10 of your friends died in the last year, so you should be used to it. It's still painful. Cultural messages around old age are incredibly impactful, such as if there's ageism and this is something that we really are bad at in the United States, we sort of dispose of old people. We don't, again, revere them and respect them and value the wisdom that they've amassed. We tend to be really focused on youth in this culture, and that can have a lot of damaging effects. Whereas there are many cultures, the book talked about Native American cultures, there are many Asian cultures that have a much greater respect for elders, and plan on them being a part of the family. There are many cultures where they plan on taking care of elder parents or elder family members and revere them. Because a resiliency factor in old age is also just the wisdom experience that you've had. And so if that is respected by others, that can be even more powerful and useful, and the feeling that it can be important at this stage to feel like you can still give back and share that wisdom. So having receptive ears to that wisdom can be really important to one's emotional well-being. I also wanted to highlight, there's this photographer, Ari Seth Cohen, who does these different photo books, and he has an Instagram, and he's always taking photos of older adults who still enjoy getting dressed, who are very stylish, and his project is called Advanced Style. But I think it's just such a beautiful art project that celebrates old age and that we can still live and have fun and enjoy things such as how we get dressed at every stage of life, and that there's still a lot of vitality in old age. And if you think about it, you have a lot of wisdom by the time that you are 70 plus. You should know who you are. So it can be a time of really focusing on the things that you enjoy, of focusing on your hobbies, investing in the friends that you love, the family members that you love and enjoy. So it can be a time of flourishing, or it can be a time of isolation and depression, and a whole spectrum in between. And as I said earlier, the impact of lifelong inequality and or privilege really shows up at this stage. It impacts health outcomes, access to resources which you need in old age, etc. So what are interventions if you're going to be working with individuals in this age group? I would say probably one of my top 3 favorite clients of all time was, we'll call her Betsy, and she was in her 80s, and she had cancer, and she was in remission, but there was a high chance it could come back. And I spent, I think, 12 or 13 sessions with her, and a lot of it was just reviewing her life, the age that she was in, and having a cancer diagnosis. It was important to her to just spend time reflecting on the life that she'd lived, and we spent a lot of time kind of exploring how she felt about gender roles and what she'd lived through, which I found very fascinating, and I received a lot from that. I tried to receive her wisdom. But that life review, that reminiscence, providing them space to tell their story is really important, because it's such a time of meaning making. Again, you're looking back at the life that you've lived. lived, and perhaps figuring out how to best enjoy the life that you have remaining. The dual process model is incredibly applicable at this stage, particularly for, again, grieving widowers and widows. Stages of dying is very applicable. Again, Kubler-Ross is often misused, but it was created for people preparing for their own death. And so that can be a very common phenomenon in old age, of course. And also the meaning reconstruction model by Niemeyer. This is, again, meaning making is really the name of the game here. It's also important to note that resurgence of old losses can be common. And what do I mean by that? Because it's such a time of reflection, it can be a time of going back to losses that you've experienced throughout the lifespan and revisiting them, dusting them off, and seeing if there's any new meaning to be made. Spiritually attentive interventions are very important, particularly for this age group. And again, if we look at the importance of meaning making, spirituality is something that older adults tend to gravitate more towards than you might feel like you need to when you're young. And so making sure that you're providing an opportunity for them to discuss their spiritual and religious beliefs can be very important. And lastly, not to be a downer, but there is a high suicide risk in older adults. Males over 75 are actually the highest risk of suicide of all age groups. And if you think about it, for some people, it's just wanting to die on their own terms. And for others, it can be attended to if they're experiencing a lot of depression and isolation. So those are some important factors that you should always be aware of. And I wanted to close this lecture out on a poem because, again, in our conversations around grief and loss, it's not all about death, but loss is powerful. And if we can approach loss with dignity and understand that loss is a part of life, there can be a kind of beauty that comes from that. And so the ultimate example of that is facing our own mortality. So this is A Song of Living by a poet, Amelia Josephine Burr. I think for me, this just really highlights how facing loss can actually allow us to really live a very full life. And so that is my wish for all of us. So, A Song of Living by Amelia Josephine Burr. Because I loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. I have sent up my gladness on wings to be lost in the blue of the sky. I have run and leapt with the rain. I have taken the wind to my breast. My cheek like a drowsy child to the face of the earth I have pressed. Because I have loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. I have kissed young love on the lips, I have heard his song to the end. I have struck my hand like a seal in the loyal hand of a friend. I have known the peace of heaven, the comfort of work done well. I have longed for death in the darkness and risen alive out of hell. Because I have loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. So that is my hope for all of you, not in a macabre way, even around death, but to live life fully. I think that is the ultimate answer to the reality of loss in life, is that it allows us the recognition that life is precious and we should live it to the fullest that we can. Take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.